Welcome to the latest episode of Flip the Cap, the insurance industry's premier podcast. I'm your host, Kathryn Smith, and we're going to take a deep dive into the transportation industry today, sharing important trends, legislative changes, and much, much more. On today's episode of Flip the Cap, I'm joined by special guest Roman Atkielski, who's the transportation practice leader at Jencap. He's an insurance veteran with 30 plus years of experience in underwriting, marketing, and program development. Roman has dedicated his entire career to the transportation industry, holding various roles with insurance carriers, reinsurers, and MGAs. I'm really excited to tap into your industry-leading expertise in the transportation industry today. So without further ado, let's pop the top and let's get into it. Thank you for being here, Roman.
Thank you for having me.
So by now our viewers know that we like to kick off the podcast with a couple of very easy getting to know you questions, which sometimes is more unnerving for some than like actually getting into your expertise. But so we're going to start with, prior to embarking on your post-college professional career, what were some of your more noteworthy jobs as a kiddo growing up?
I worked actually in the horse racing industry in the Chicagoland area.
Okay.
Very interesting. It was a great place to work. Seasonal work, so it only ran during the summertime. So what that really equated to was a lot of high school and college kids working at this track. So it was just a really fun place to work, right?
Yeah.
And I held all sorts of different positions there. Worked there all through high school and college, so a total of about 8 years. Started off as like a tour guide and did some customer service work. One summer, I even drove the horse ambulance for a summer, which was kind of a, you never wished I always kind of prayed that I never had to go out there. So did that, but wound up the last 2 years in their marketing department and interned in their marketing department.
Huh.
Thought about actually making it a career until I was introduced to the insurance world.
Interesting. Are you still into horses?
I do. I still have some friends from the business, have attended the Kentucky Derby, the Belmont, some of the races of the Triple Crown.
So insurance has moved you around the country quite a bit. So talk to me about a couple of the places that you've ventured around with various different jobs and why you kept agreeing to move so much.
So I'll just kind of give you a rundown of the different cities that I've lived in or places that I've lived in. So I started off in Chicago, was in Philadelphia for a period of time, then Atlanta, then up to New Jersey, then back to Dallas for a period of time, and then back to Atlanta. The longest stint has been in Atlanta, 10 years the first period of time, and about 15 the second. But I always welcomed the change. I thought it was an exciting time to meet new people and inside and outside of the insurance industry, and just the, different cultures. And, always thought it was an exciting event to take a move.
Where was one of your favorite places outside of Atlanta?
Favorite place? I quite liked Philadelphia.
Okay.
Probably my second favorite.
This is a total oddball question, but if you were forced to compete, or not forced, if you were asked to compete in a talent show, what would you show up as your talent?
I think I try to be a comedian.
Okay. I feel that, knowing you.
Yeah, I like to joke around a lot. I like seeing people laugh. I like to laugh myself. And, frankly, if I'm the brunt of the joke, I'm probably the hardest guy laughing. So love making people laugh and have a good time.
What is your favorite TV series?
So I think I mentioned earlier that I grew up in the Chicagoland area. So I was growing up when the Chicago Bulls were making their dynasty in the 90s. And Michael Jordan, that's right. So I love watching, what's the name of that series? The Last Dance. The Last Dance. That's right. Talks about the dynasty of the Chicago Bulls, kind of how they came from nothing and rose to several championships, and then kind of the end of the demise of the team when people started getting traded off and so forth. And get to see my favorite player, Michael Jordan. I think one of the best players ever played the game. So I keep watching it over and over again. Anytime it's on, I'll watch it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I went to UNC, so obviously MJ has a special place in my heart. But
that's right.
He used to come to Chapel Hill a ton when I was in college. And it was just like, this isn't normal that Michael Jordan shows up and is just buying everybody drinks. And
But what a great experience.
Sure. If we could go back for so many reasons. So if you could meet one person in history that is no longer living, who would you want to meet and why?
I think there's a lot of people that, I'd like to meet and ask some questions to. But one that really sticks out in my mind is Steve Jobs. Just his innovation and willingness to think outside the box. And if I met him, I think I'd ask the question and be like, hey, did you ever think that your work or your technology would change daily life like it has? And frankly, his answer is probably yes. But I would love to meet him. I think it'd be a very interesting person.
Especially Steve Jobs towards the end of his life, and just how much his perception of what's important shifted. Of that whole, if I could go back, these are some of the things that I would do differently. I think who you would meet in his 30s versus 40, it's fascinating, the evolution of who he was as a person too.
For sure.
Of like what stage of his life you would even have that conversation.
I don't disagree with you.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Roman is going to be in the hot seat and he is going to play Flip the Cap. Deb Diaguardi at Jencap holds currently the top spot, the leaderboard, with 2 tosses. So we will we'll see how you fare. That's the score to beat, and we'll be right back.
Flip the Cap is brought to you by Jencap. Jencap is one of the largest wholesale intermediaries in the United States, with expertise in wholesale brokerage, binding authority, and program management. Jencap has specialized divisions and affiliate companies that provide niche expertise, unparalleled market access, and nationwide influence. Encompassing expertise from every corner of the industry, Jencap is the ultimate award-winning insurance family. Put Jencap to work for you.
We're back, and you're tuned in to Flip the Cap, the insurance industry's premier podcast where insurance insights flow and trending topics are always on tap. I'm joined by special guest Roman Atkielski, who's the transportation practice leader at Jencap. Coming up, Roman and I are going to talk about some of the key trends that are plaguing the transportation industry, last mile delivery, information that you're not going to want to miss, and much more. But first, lucky you get to play Flip the Cap. We play this with all of our guests. As you can see, Deb Diaguardi holds the top spot on the leaderboard with 2 tosses. This is pretty self-explanatory. I feel sure you've played a drinking game at some point in your life that this was
once or twice
common practice. So the only real rule here is try to beat Deb, and your elbow just can't cross the table. Otherwise, let's see what you got, Roman.
Let's see what we got. All right, let's give it a go. I was hoping for that number 1.
You could tie. So now that we've had some fun with Roman, we've gotten to know him a little bit better. It's time to dig into the nitty-gritty of the transportation industry. We'll be right back. So I'd like to kick off our conversation by talking about the transportation insurance industry at a macro level. I feel like a completely broken record on the podcast talking about capacity issues and rate increases and all of these things, but the transportation industry is actually a little bit different than some of the other lines we've been talking about. So from your perspective, what's happening in the transportation industry? How did we get here? What's the general landscape that we're working within these days?
To kind of give you just a landscape of the transportation world, I'll start probably with a decade ago. We saw that rates were completely soft at that time. They were producing unfavorable underwriting results, and we were losing capacity in the market. So fast forward to about 5 years ago, we saw the insurance industry react to those soft rates. Rates started to hit a high level or high watermark, rates that we had never seen before. We're now kind of seeing rates soften a little bit, and that's due to more players in the market, more acceptability of E&S placements over admitted markets. I don't know that I ever see rates getting back to where they were 10 years ago or a decade ago, but they are softening a little bit.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a good thing for the motor carriers, right?
True.
And I think the rates are sufficient at this point. I don't know that we'll ever see rates again at the level that they were a decade ago. And it is very much industry specific. So rates will fluctuate on the type of vehicles that you're using.
Yeah. And I know we're going to dig in a little bit later into some of the things happening in the transportation industry with data and analytics. So we'll save that conversation for a little bit later, because I know it definitely plays into just the rate environment in the transportation industry. So there are several challenges plaguing. There's always a challenge plaguing a particular industry. But in the case of the transportation industry, there's driver shortages, obviously fuel costs that were all impacted by supply chain issues. Let's dig into some of those specific things that are impacting the transportation industry as a whole and how that sort of parlays into our insurance world that, we deal with on a daily basis.
So you mentioned driver shortages. Yeah, there's a huge driver shortage in the industry right now. It's estimated that there's a 75,000 driver shortage or deficit right now. It is a lot. It is a lot. And they're estimating that these drivers, that shortage will double by 2030. The government is addressing it. People are addressing it. Where do we get more drivers? Well, we think the answer to that is younger drivers. How do we get younger drivers into the industry? One idea that's been kicked around is lowering the CDL age, where we can attract people that are coming right out of high school to get interested in this industry, as opposed to picking up some other trade or learning another vocation right out of high school. Some of the underwriting concerns that we have regarding younger drivers or the driver shortage is people are working hours are too long. They're just working too long. They're not taking the sufficient breaks.
And then what about some of the infrastructure issues, some of the fuel cost rises? Well,
so fuel costs really hit the industry very hard, and it hit it very hard even just last summer. We saw retention of accounts going down at a pretty record pace. And if y'all remember, gas at that point was like $6 to $7 per gallon.
He's painful no matter what you drove, where you drove.
It was painful any way you looked at it.
Yeah.
But we really saw it in our book of business. We had a summer that was we were losing accounts, and it wasn't so much that we were losing them due to competition. It was more that we were just losing them because they were going out of business, and that was direct cause of one of the direct causes was the fuel cost.
Do you feel a rebound now that fuel costs?
We are seeing an upswing, particularly in the smaller motor carriers.
Okay.
You mentioned infrastructure problems. Our roads and bridges and tunnels, they are antiquated, and frankly, in some areas, just not safe. One of the other trends that's, hurting the industry at this point are the litigious environment that we live in. These nuclear verdicts is kind of the corn word that we're hearing around the industry, and it's serious. I pulled some information. The number of cases with verdicts over $1 million increasing 235% since 2005. A prime example of this, there's a case that can be pulled up in Florida. $1 billion verdict was just issued in the state of Florida. So it's a problem, and frankly, it hits the bottom line everywhere. Situations where the motor carriers are getting pulled into these accounts, even if they're not into these cases, even if they're not at fault. And it's just the perception of deep pockets with the motor carrier, as well as the insurance policies that they're required to handle or required to have.
I have to think that when you're talking about how, some of these motor carriers are getting roped into, they were at fault just because they're the big guy on the street, having some of these technological advances is going to significantly improve, hopefully, or temper some of that of, you can say that I was at fault all day long, but now I have cameras all around my truck, and come at me if you want, but the evidence is the evidence.
Yeah, Kathryn, and we'll touch on the cameras a little bit later in our conversation, but yes, you're exactly right. If we can, show on camera that the person was not liable, the claim can go away. The problem with the claims are a little bit is when they do get pulled in, you still have to defend yourself.
All the more reason why you need to make sure that you have exactly the coverage that you need to protect your business because of that litigious environment. And then that just is a direct path right back to Jencap of it's so important to work with someone who specializes in the transportation industry and understands every little nuance, because no two businesses are the same, to make sure that, everywhere that there could possibly be a gap or an area of exposure, that they're protected, because it wouldn't be a little, the tiniest little crack somebody could get in. And, to your point about a litigious environment, it wouldn't be insignificant in terms of what exposure they would have these days.
No, that's right. And we have specialists, in the industry. I feel like I'm a specialist in the transportation world at Jencap, but we have specialists in all different lines, whether that be property or hired non-owned coverages or professional lines. But that's what Jencap brings to the table as a value.
So we can't talk about transportation trends without talking about last mile delivery. We're all, we all have some sort of understanding of what that is. We obviously can dig in a little bit deeper from an insurance standpoint. The last mile delivery market is expected to grow between now and 2027 by $165 billion with a B dollars. And in North America, it's almost $62 billion. That's obviously influenced by just the growing global e-commerce market, which is going to continue to be more and more and more prevalent in our day-to-day lives. The last mile in the delivery process is the most complicated, it's the most expensive, and not for nothing, it's the most important. If you don't get the package or the good to the end consumer, it's futile. Let's talk about last mile delivery just at a high level of what it is, and then insurance specifically, what some of the challenges are, and what the exposures are for that risk. I think a lot of times our agents don't understand why it's so challenging to insure some of those risks, but I know that you've got some insights into that.
Yeah, for sure. And great topic. That's kind of a phrase, but it's basically, how do the goods get to Roman's doorstep or Kathryn's doorstep from a warehouse here in Atlanta, right? What's that final leg of getting that product to the actual consumer? And actually, I feel like I should have my family here because it feels...
Prime Day just happened. I think I saw them like 4 times this morning.
That's exactly right, because, it seems like we have a package delivered every day. And it's just becoming more and more commonplace, from ordering a shirt or a sweater or some type of product to groceries and so forth being delivered to your home. The trucking industry is highly regulated. There's a lot of regulation on the maintenance of the vehicles, the hours that the drivers are operating, and the insurances that they are required to have. When you get into the last mile, you're talking more private passenger vehicles. You're talking pickup trucks. You're talking panel vans. You're maybe just even a regular 4-door sedan, right? That's delivering goods to your home. And you're talking more owner-operator exposure. Guys that actually own the vehicles and are not working for a fleet, right? I guess a common misconception is that, my personal insurance will pick this up and, I'm covered. Well, your personal insurance is not going to cover you while it's in use of any type of commercial use. Coverage is for specifically the independent contractors, non-trucking liability coverage. Now, for a tractor trailer, it's a pretty easy placement. We don't see a lot of tractors taking, your family to the store or things like that. But in the last mile, it's a lot more personal use. So where's that division between personal use and commercial use, and where's divided, and how do we cover that? NTL coverage, or non-trucking liability coverage, is liability coverage when the vehicles are used for non-business related activities. So it becomes more of a difficult placement when we're talking about private passenger vehicles and making that division between personal use and commercial use.
Really, every topic that we've covered so far about the transportation industry, to some degree, we could have had a very in-depth conversation within each about the role of data and analytics and how it's impacting the industry from a loss prevention standpoint, a rate standpoint, profitability standpoint. I mean, it goes on and on and on. What are some of the very specific roles that you see data and analytics playing in the transportation industry today? And how is it really, do you see it changing the game?
I do see it changing the game. And 2 areas specifically would probably be telematics as well as cameras. this is no longer like the exception or, hey, some companies are using it. It's becoming the standard in the industry from an underwriting perspective.
The requirement of having them?
That's correct. That's correct. So what telematics really does is it monitors driver behaviors, speeds, time behind the wheel, hard brakes, that type of thing. The telematics, a little bit of the challenge, I mean, while it's really great data and great data to have, we need to get enough of the data. I think right now everybody's installing the telematics, they're putting them into the vehicles, but how do we aggregate that data? And how does that data then get to a point where we can then apply it to an insurance rate?
Right.
The second thing that we touched on this a little bit earlier, are the cameras in the vehicles. They're vital, just for the reasons that I think you mentioned earlier, is, we can just say, hey, we weren't at fault in this accident. We're still going to have to defend ourselves. We're probably still going to have to show up in court and talk about this. But at the end of the day, the camera can really show who was at fault in a particular accident. There's also, technology now for the cameras are forward facing. They're also backwards facing. They're facing the drivers. So that's more information that we can obtain, is what was that driver doing when the accident actually happened.
Or from a loss prevention standpoint, there never was an accident, but do you have a driver who's texting while they're driving? Are they, swerving in and out? You can, with that information and knowledge, make adjustments to prevent an accident from ever happening. And that's really the name of the game, is stop something from ever becoming a claim, ever becoming a loss.
That's right. And it goes back to like the telematics conversation where we were saying driving behavior. What are there indicators, hard brakes, the speed, how long you've been in the vehicle, all these type of things are indicators of what's a good driver, what's a bad driver. And we're really trying to determine, we're trying to find those good drivers, right? And weed out the bad drivers from the industry.
We've all been on the highway and there's been somebody behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler and we're all thinking to ourselves, oh my gosh, if only their employer knew. I mean, they're going to kill somebody, the way that they're driving, whether it's aggressively or they're on their phones swerving in and out or just blowing past people. You're like, oh, that is going to become the industry standard where we can comfortably say, you're going to get in trouble.
Well, that's exactly right. And it's not becoming really the industry standard. It is here. It is the industry standard. That is exactly correct. And, frankly, it just gets back to what we said earlier, is just getting enough data.
That's the only part that remains to be seen.
And how do we collect this data and aggregate this data and then correlate this to insurance premiums and rates?
And, to your point, it's something that our retail partners need to really be properly communicating to the end insured of, these are going to be requirements as, renewals are coming up, et cetera. Get ready, plan for it. If it's not already just, common practice within your business.
Drivers and motor carriers are taking this stuff more seriously. Safety, loss control, telematics, finding good drivers, that type of thing, because they don't want to pay the high premium rates that we're at right now. And so how do we solve that? Well, we solve that through these loss control items.
But talk about Jencap's value proposition in the transportation insurance space and how we're structured, what specifically we're doing to set our retail partners up for success, and the types of risks that they can come to us to solve their insurance needs.
Absolutely. We run the gamut for motor carriers. We have markets for a one driver, one unit, new venture type of deal, up to multi-state, large fleets. We have binding authority, in-house binding authority for a lot of our programs. We also have brokerage capabilities if it falls outside of those binding authorities. We write on an admitted basis. We also write on an E&S basis for our more difficult or harder risks to place. And we've great underwriters, great talented underwriters, people with 20, 30 years of experience that have been doing this and have seen everything in the industry. And we turn around quotes very quickly. So we get that out to our agents. We feel the sooner that we can get something in front of the agent as well, and then respect their respective client, the better chance we have of winning that account.
I think an important thing to note in terms of how we're structured with our new business specialists is it requires a different level of expertise to process a quick $2,000 policy versus a large multi-state, fleet policy that's $200,000 in premium. You have the expertise structured in such a way that exactly what that risk requires in terms of a set of eyes and a set of expertise, you're going to get that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And to your point, yes, a large multi-fleet, risk is obviously going to have or require more underwriting data than a new venture that we would see. But yes, we have talented underwriters that can handle, all facets of the industry, one unit up to, infinity.
And they're strategically placed throughout the country because there are very specific nuances based on your geographic location, which also helps. Unfortunately, Roman, our time is up, but thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Kathryn Smith. Flip the Cap is the insurance industry's premier podcast where insurance insights flow and trending topics are always on tap. Until next time, cheers.